I'm going to give you a full walk round Maude, my moredoor Mk2 Escort. 1300 cross flow, that's obviously been swapped a few times over the years. Matte black when I first got this car on the road, RS2000 style one. Bilstein front legs, go for loads of money. Quite crazy lock compared to standard. Carbon fibre one, genuine carbon fibre. This setup works really, really well. This water rail, which I hate, really poor design. CBR 900 bike carbs, unsprung 4-paddle clutch, Pranex LSD fitted and uprated half shafts because last year I ended up snapping one of the original ones. Hello and welcome to this video. I'm Marcus Hayes, and ages ago now I uploaded a video where I described exactly how I went about converting Maude, my Mk2 Escort, and ENSTA, my Mk1 Escort, to run rear-wheel drive Zetec setups. I know loads of you guys found that video helpful, but since then a couple of things, especially on Maude, have changed. So I've been wanting to make an updated video showing my rear-wheel drive Zetec conversions. Now, some of you guys said that it would have been more helpful if I went into detail about the transmission side of my conversions and describe the flywheels and clutches and gearboxes that I used. So I definitely want to do that this time. But what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to go through the full spec of both of those cars. I remember when I first started making car videos, I've always intended to do a full spec list on ENSTA, my Mk1 Escort in particular, because she's my favourite car and she's always had a better spec. Although since then, Maude's spec has got closer and closer to what ENSTA's is. So yeah, I'm going to give you a full walk round on both of those cars and describe the spec in detail. Now, while I'm at it, I'm also going to let you guys know about some parts that I'm planning to get rid of that I will eventually put on eBay, but if any of you guys need those parts, then I'm happy to give you first refusal before I start advertising them on eBay. So I'm going to start by giving you a walk around Maude, my moredoor Mk2 Escort, who is in the garage here at home, so I'll meet you around there. Alright, so this is my 1978 moredoor Mk2 Escort that I like to call Maude. Originally, she was a 1300 GL, and when I got her, she still had a 1300 crossflow in the engine bay. That's obviously been swapped a few times over the years, and now she's running an ST170 engine, which we'll have a look at in a minute. The outside was painted matte black when I first got this car on the road, but I've since changed to matte signal blue. I think it's RAL 5005, the paint code, but yeah, it's just matte signal blue. Now, being a GL, this used to have the chrome trims down the side, but I decided to fill the holes and get rid of the trims. I actually do have a set of those trims which came off my other moredoor Mk2 Escort, which I've also filled the holes of. So if any of you guys are in the market for a set of GL, I think the gears have the same, the chrome trims down the side, definitely get in touch. When we go and have a look at ENSTA, my Mk1 Escort, I'll try and remember to dig them out and show you. Now, continuing with the exterior, all the chrome bits like the wing mirrors, door handles, also the boot lock, have all been painted satin black with spray cans. Oh, and the fuel cap as well. And the bumpers are now also black. These were actually powder coated by Microblast Services in Windsor. And these are the bumpers that came on this car, which were chrome with a black trim, but I've removed that trim so you can still see the holes there. But yeah, as I say, they've been powder coated black to fit in with her new colour scheme. Quite recently, I changed the boot lid and the bonnet for these fiberglass items. This is obviously an RS2000 style one. So the spoiler is actually moulded into the boot, and I painted the boot signal blue with a roller, and then the spoiler satin black. You can see that I've got these rubber clamp things to hold the boot lid down, although it still does have the boot lock working as well. And yeah, I switched the number plates for the chrome and black ones, which again ties in with the whole colour scheme of the car. Speaking of the fiberglass bonnet, it actually came with these holes already in it. So you've got these triangle ones, which I think are sort of reminiscent of the Opel Mantas. And yeah, it's got these holes here, which I guess are to let heat out from the exhaust manifold. But I did add this black mesh behind there, and I've just riveted those bits in with these silver rivets. This bonnet did already come with a set of bonnet pins with these metal plates, but I got a brand new set of bonnet pins, and I painted this plate black because this was actually silver. When I took this plate off to do the paintwork on this bonnet, I discovered that there was a bit of a crack in the fiberglass, so that's obviously why they added these plates. But yeah, actually really like the look of this bonnet with the holes in it and stuff. It makes the front end look a bit mean. Now the wheels that are fitted to this car are banded Steelies. They are now 7.5-inch wide fronts and 8-inch wide rears. They are 13-inch Steelies, and these actually came off my dad's Mk2 Escort, and originally they were only 4.5 inches wide. So I had 3 inches added to the width on the front ones and 3.5 inches added to the width on the rear ones. And these of course have been painted satin black with a rattle can to fit in with the rest of the car. And for a rat look drift car, I actually think she looks really cool with the blue and the black. And yeah, loving the stance of this thing now, which brings me smoothly onto the suspension. Now the front suspension on this car actually used to be fitted to my Mk2 Escort, and it's basically the blue Bilstein front legs that come from 2.8 Capris, I think, but they're the very sought after blue Bilstein front legs. Go for loads of money nowadays on eBay. They've still got the standard shock absorbers in them, but they do have 3-inch lowered springs fitted, and then I ended up cutting another coil off the springs just to lower them a bit more. And when I fitted those front legs to this car, it enabled me to fit the shorter steering arms, which have given Maude some extra lock. As you can see, quite crazy lock compared to standard. And yeah, that's been awesome in terms of improving the driftability of this old banger. It's got a 2.9 tons lock-to-lock steering rack fitted now. It's got a twin cam anti-roll bar, which improves the caster by bringing the front wheels slightly more forward in the front arches, and the anti-roll bar has the double width clamps on them, so they've got 4 bolts either side instead of 2. The car also has braided brake lines, and the ones that are fitted to this car, they sort of look like your stock brake lines. They're black rather than, silver. And in fact, there are a wide range of braided brake lines available on my website now at marcushayesuk.com, both the original looking black style ones and the more blingy silver Goodrich brake lines, which I've actually got fitted to the other car. So into the cockpit, you can see I've got an aftermarket steering wheel. This is an STR steering wheel that I got from McGill Motorsport. It's all stripped out in the back, no back seats, makes it much easier to fill the car with tyres and tools when we go to drift days. Got a set of bucket seats, which are actually given to me by my friend Gary. Got a Sparco Corsa for the driver and a Sparco Sprint for the passenger, and I've got a set of blue Luke harnesses, which actually were fitted to my Mk2 Escort when I got that car. Now, the centre console, I used to have an alloy one of these, but I recently swapped for this carbon fibre one, which I got from Gary Ball, who is the guy that supplied me loads of carbon fibre for the other car. Got this really cool switch panel with a push button start, which was fake carbon fibre effect, but I decided to paint it signal blue to match the car. And this was actually given to me by Chris Ennigan, I do believe. And as you can see, I've got the ME100 ECU from Motorsport Electronics, just velcroed onto this switch panel. Also available on my website at marcushayesuk.com, and that is what's controlling the engine in this car. And you can see here that I've got an aftermarket quick shift, which is for my Type 9 gearbox that I've got fitted in here. I've got a fire stick mounted under the dash there, just in case we get a fire. I've actually got one of those fitted to my Mk2 Escort as well, and I was advised by rally legend Frank Kelly to fit these to my cars when I went to visit him. Another thing I've changed on the interior of this car is this really nice flocked dash. This dash was actually all cracked. This is the original dash that came with the car, but this was flocked for me. And I can't actually remember the company that did that for me, but I will put their name at the bottom of the screen here, and I'll leave all their links in the description, along with the links for any other companies that I mention in this video. So yeah, other than that, I've got my Marcus Hayes air freshener, also available on my website at marcushayesuk.com. Quite recently, I started making some custom door cards for this car. I need to wrap them or, you know, coat them in something. I actually did it a bit wrong because this plastic that I got comes gloss on one side and matte on the other, and instead of mirroring the shape, yeah, this side is now gloss and that side's matte. But as I say, I will be wrapping them or covering them in something. And also got these genuine carbon fibre interior door handles, which again came from Gary Ball. I think other than that, oh, one more thing, I have switched the throttle pedal for this Group 4 style one. I just realised that I was talking about the front suspension earlier, but haven't mentioned the rear suspension. Now this car's still running on leaf springs. It has got a set of decambered single leaf springs fitted, where basically they flatten out the leaf springs to lower the car by 2 inches. I've also got some lowering blocks in there, which I think are 1/2 inch on this car, giving the car 2.5 inch drop at the back in total. The rear shock absorbers are Gaz Gold adjustable ones, and it's worth mentioning that the whole car is polybushed, which is an awesome modification in my opinion. Some people say it takes away some of the comfort of the car, but realistically, are you driving a Mk2 Escort for comfort? No. Polybushes really do improve things like turn in and just makes the car feel a lot less sloppy than it would with the original rubber bushes, especially if you've got old, worn out rubber bushes. And I've actually got a wide range of poly bushes available on my website at marcushayesuk.com, so definitely go and check those out if you're in the market for any poly bushes for your car. It's worth noting as well, with the parts that are available on my website, if you don't see what you require, drop me an email and I'll source the parts that you need from one of my trusted suppliers. My email address will be in the description. So I think we'll have a look in the boot now. I can show you the fuel pump setup and stuff. So as you can see, this car is still running the original fuel tank, and the fuel is delivered by this facet fuel pump, and it goes through this Maude adjustable fuel pressure regulator. Got it mounted on this really cool alloy bracket, and this whole setup was actually fitted to my Mk2 Escort when she was running a carbed Pinto engine back in the day. This setup works really, really well. Got the fuel line coming in from the tank here into the fuel pump, then through the fuel pressure regulator, and then it goes back underneath the car, and the rest of the fuel hoses, as it would have been originally, it runs underneath the car. As you can see, I haven't bothered repainting inside here or anything. I do carry a spare wheel around with me, although I don't have the strap to hold it in. But yeah, not much more to say really about in the boot. So now let's have a look at the business end, check out the heart of the beast, and I can talk you through all the parts that I've used to convert this thing to a rear-wheel drive Zetec setup. So what we've got here is a 2 litre 16 valve engine from a Mk1 Focus ST170, which is basically an updated version of the late blacktop Zetec engines that Ford fitted to loads of cars. The main differences that I know of, apparently these have slightly stronger rods and pistons in them, but they're nothing like a proper aftermarket set of forged pistons and steel rods. Most of the updates are in the cylinder head though. I think the valves are all bigger. I do know that the inlet ports are slightly bigger and slightly higher up on the cylinder head. This also has variable valve timing on the inlet cam, which the Zetec doesn't have. And I think that's basically all the differences. Now this engine is completely stock internally, stock bottom end, stock cylinder head. It does have a vernier pulley on the exhaust cam, and that enabled us to dial in the power band essentially when the car was on the dyno. I think it's running about 4 degrees retard. This engine's looking a bit prettier than it otherwise would be, thanks to a hydro dipped rocker cover that was done for me by Kieran, aka Little Red Fiesta, on YouTube. Definitely go and check out his channel if you haven't already. already, I'll leave a link in the description. This engine's running on a set of Honda CBR 900 bike carbs that were actually given to me by Johnny Bamber. Massive shout and a thanks to you, mate. And they're sitting on an inlet manifold from Dan ST Engineering, and this is a proper ST170 inlet manifold, because as I say, the ports are slightly different compared to a Zetec one. Now there's a few parts you need to change when you want to put a Zetec in a rear-wheel drive Ford Escort. The engine mounts that you can just see down there are from Retro Ford. In my opinion, they're the best off-the-shelf rear-wheel drive Zetec mounts that you can get. I've also got a Retro Ford alternator kit on this car. They actually do two types. This is the sort of non-motorsport version, which has got this normal type alternator on it. But on my Mk2 Escort, I've got one of their lightweight Nippon Denso alternator kits. And in fact, I've got lightweight Nippon Denso alternator kits for various different Ford setups available on my website at marcushayesuk.com. So whether you've got a Pinto, Crossflow, Duratec or Zetec, I've got an alternator kit for you if you want to switch over to a lightweight motorsport style alternator. Underneath the bike carbs, I've got the coil pack mounted on a bracket that I got from Retro Ford, and these longer HT leads, which mean you can run the coil pack under there, were also from Retro Ford. The radiator in this car is just a stock Crossflow one, but I do have an electric fan mounted on the front of it with these sort of cable tie style attachments. Now the oil catch can on this car is just a Halford's coolant bottle. I've got one pipe going to the top of the rocker cover there. Actually had to block off the original ST170 breather thing. You can't really weld these covers because there's too much magnesium in apparently, so I just used Araldite and yeah, basically drilled a hole in the side here, which means that the breather's still where the baffle is inside this rocker cover. And yeah, this is basically like a screw-on barb fitting, so inside there is a nut holding this on. Now around the other side of the engine, I've got this water rail, which I hate because it puts the thermostat at the back here. So if you need to change the thermostat, you pretty much need to remove the engine. Really poor design. In fact, the company that supplied this supplied the oil sumps that I used to have fitted to this and my Mk2 Escort that leaked like sieves, but I've now switched over to alloy sumps on both my cars from G19 Engineering, which are genuine Ford silver top sumps that have been modified to fit in a rear-wheel drive Escort. Although in all honesty, it's worth noting that around this side, because there's sort of, you know, a wing on that sump, it did foul the cross member, so I had to sort of, you know, put a nick in the cross member to make that clear. Another thing you could do is use washers in between the mount and the cross member, the engine mount and the cross member, to lift the engine up slightly. But yeah, absolutely love these sumps because they don't leak, unlike the old ones I had fitted. Now the exhaust manifolding system on this car is just an Ashley Maude steel manifolding system, which isn't the best fit. The passenger side floor has had to be whacked to make clearance. But yeah, there's nothing else I could do about that really. Oh, and I didn't finish talking about the breather. So the other breather from the catch can goes into the original flame trap, I think you'd call that, or block breather box thing, but where this would normally have a PCV valve, which basically only enables the oil vapours to come out when the revs are high, because originally on a Zetec or an ST170 that vapour would get fed back and burned by the engine. Yeah, with my PCV valve I've basically gutted it, so it's essentially now just used like as an adapter sort of thing, so the spring and stuff inside it I've removed, and yeah, this basically now just breathes at all times. And yeah, I've just got it going to a catch can because I don't want to feed it back into my engine, because I want my engine to run on fuel and air, not oil. Now another thing to mention on this car is the coolant hoses. Now I actually made these up using a combination of Volvo, I believe, and Land Rover hoses, and I need to dig out the information on what hoses they exactly are. I've got it all written down in my MacBook, so I'll insert a clip now explaining what exactly those hoses are. Alright, so as you can see, the top radiator hose that I've fitted to Maude is from a Volvo 850, S70 or V70 up until the year 2000, and it's the top radiator hose on the Volvo as well. One thing to mention though, the diameter of the hose is a bit too big for the radiator, so I've got a piece of Escort hose on the radiator inlet, and then I've slid the Volvo hose over that. So I'm using a bit of hose as a reducer essentially. Also on Maude's radiator hose, I've got what was my fan controller inserted into the hose, so the hose is essentially split in two, and that's because I used to have that controller controlling when the fan comes on, but that controller stopped working, and I've now got a fan switch in the water rail, but yeah, the controller's still in there essentially as a hose joiner. Now, Maude's bottom radiator hose is an upper radiator hose from a Land Rover Freelander from 1997 to 2006, and it's the one that's fitted to all the 2.5 litre KV6 models. And this diagram shows the slight modifications I had to make to that hose. So you can see this section on the right hand side had to be taken out, so essentially this piece had to be shortened, so I had to use a hose joiner and a couple of Jubilee clips there. And this piece over here, where the T-piece is, that needed to be loosened and just reorientated, and the 90-degree piece that comes out of the other side of that T-piece needed to be shortened, just so that the hose doesn't end up hitting the crank pulley. And to be honest, I end up having to have the hose cable tied to my anti-roll bar to make it not hit the crank pulley. So a bit of hassle, but you can make this Land Rover hose work. But I will say that I've got retro Ford hoses fitted to my Mk2 Escort, and they are expensive, but realistically, even if you do it this way, by the time you've bought hose joiners and stuff that you need to make these work, and Jubilee clips and whatnot, you don't end up saving that much money, and these don't look anywhere near as good as the retro Ford ones. Now, I think that's everything in terms of what's in the engine bay, but as I mentioned earlier in this video, some of you guys were saying that in the last real drive conversion video I made, I didn't mention the flywheel, clutch and transmission and that sort of thing. So this car has got a light flywheel, and there's a couple of things I wasn't happy with it. I found that the starter motor didn't engage with the ring gear properly, so I basically ended up removing the ring gear that came on the flywheel and fitting one from a stock Zetec flywheel. And the crank sensor, which is down there, and it's a magnetic sensor that picks up on the holes that are in the flywheel to tell the ECU where exactly the engine is in terms of, its cycle. Well, I found that the crank sensor was actually rubbing on the back of the flywheel, so I've had to space the crank sensor away with some washers. So yeah, that makes the flywheel not the best. I've actually got a better one fitted to my Mk2 Escort, but I'll explain about that when I get around there. Now, the way I do real drive conversions in terms of the clutches is I have flywheels that accept a Pinto clutch. So you can either have your normal Zetec flywheel re-drilled to accept a Pinto clutch, and I think Retro Ford actually supply re-drilled flywheels. It's worth noting that you're always better off using the 1800 Zetec one rather than a 2 litre Zetec one, because they're a bit lighter. But yeah, I've got lightweight flywheels that are made to accept a Pinto clutch, so then I just run a Pinto clutch. Now, you would have seen in a very recent video, I recently switched to a Helix unsprung 4-paddle clutch on this car, and I've actually got the same clutch fitted to my Mk2 Escort. And yeah, this car's running a Type 9 gearbox from a Sierra, which means you use the normal RS2000 clutch fork and the normal release bearing. I've actually got an RS2000 alloy bell housing fitted as well, just to make it fit in the stock tunnel a bit better. I would advise anyone who's building an Escort, especially if you're in the early stages of it, to fit a large gearbox tunnel, because this car's a nightmare to change the clutch and stuff. But yeah, the gearbox is not completely standard. I had it rebuilt by HPE Motorsport. I had a longer first gear fitted whilst they were doing that, and I had the weak point of the Type 9 gearbox, which is the lay shaft bearing, I think it is. I had that upgraded to a stronger bearing, and yeah, I love the gearbox in this car with its longer first gear. It works perfectly with the diff ratio that I run in this car, which is a bit revvy compared to what some people fit. It's actually a 4.1:1 ratio diff, and it's worth noting that it's got a Tranex LSD fitted, and between the gearbox and the diff I've got a single piece motorsport spec prop shaft. Oh, this car's also got uprated half shafts, because last year I ended up snapping one of the original ones. And another thing I forgot to mention on the rear end is the rear brakes. Still running drum brakes, but they are 9-inch ones. The car's running M16 calipers on the front, which are spaced, so they're basically Capri 2.8 spec, and I'm running yellow stuff EBC pads in them, and the brake discs are vented, drilled and grooved. And yeah, I think that is pretty much everything to mention. Now, while I'm here, I've got a couple of bits that I'm looking to get rid of, if any of you guys are interested. In fact, I've had people ask me about these bits in the past, so if that's you, definitely get in touch. So over here, I've got the metal boot and bonnet that I recently removed from Maude. The boot lid is actually in quite good shape. Obviously, this thing has been painted with a roller, and I first painted it matte black with a roller years ago, so I can't remember the exact state of it, to be honest, but I have filled in the holes. I think there would have been a boot trim on this, or am I getting confused with my Mark 1? Anyway, all the trim and badge holes have been filled. I can't remember whether I welded these up or just filled them with filler, to be honest. It has this really cool MH decal on it, and they're available on my website at marcushayesuk.com in a wide range of colours. But yeah, if we look inside, which is normally where you really tell how mint a boot or a bonnet is, you can see that it's not hanging or anything at all. Let's get that in the light a bit better. Yeah, a lot of the time they are hanging where the skin folds over, but this one's not actually that bad at all. So if anyone's in the market for a boot lid, do get in touch. Now the bonnet is in a bit of a state. Those who've been watching my videos a while will remember when this and this happened. The fan on the alternator years ago basically came off the alternator when I was at full throttle. Heard a big bang, thought the engine had gone. Then I noticed that the engine was still running, but the light was on the dash. And when I pulled over, everything was sweet, apart from the alternator belt had come off. And yeah, the fan on the alternator had flung off. And yeah, it caused this damage and that damage over there. Yeah, this is basically dented around here. And yeah, you've got these mad sort of dents from the inside. And yeah, same over here, you know, sort of dents from the inside. Crazy. I couldn't believe that little alternator fan did this damage and actually put holes in it, but I suppose, you know, it is spinning at quite a rate. But yeah, again, can't exactly remember how good this bonnet is. Something tells me that there was a hole around here, but that might have actually been the front wings that used to be fitted to Maude, because they were changed for new ones a couple of years ago by KEMBER at CLUMPFAB, who is the man to go and see for your rust repair, restoration and fabrication requirements. And he's a bit of a genius with cylinder head refurbishment. That cylinder head that's on Maude now was actually refurbished by KEMBER at CLUMPFAB. But yeah, back to the bonnet. I'll just spin it round so we can have a look at the inside. So yeah, the inside of this bonnet was actually sprayed black with rattle cans by me. There's loads of, you know, surface rust, scabs everywhere, but again, it's not hanging like some of them are. I mean, I don't think this bonnet's really worth much because of the damage, but yeah, if any of you guys are in the market for a metal Mk2 Escort bonnet, just drop me an email. Hello. So I realised whilst editing the footage that you've already seen that I'm going to have to make a separate video for the walk around and spec list of INSTA, my Mk2 Escort. Otherwise the video is going to be way too long. I actually haven't been round to the other garage to film that footage yet, so that might be next on the channel, but I have been getting out loads and filming other people's cars, so there's plenty of that coming up on the channel soon as well. A couple of things I forgot about Maude is that she has the rose jointed adjustable track control arms on the front end, which allow me to dial in the camber, and she has an aftermarket anti-tramp bar kit fitted to the rear axle to prevent axle tramp. But other than that, I think I covered everything in terms of the spec of Maude. So that's it for this video. If you did think it was any good, please do give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Click subscribe if you're new to keep up to date with all my future uploads, and check the links in the description to follow me on social media. I'll leave a link to my website down there for any of you guys that want to check out my regular blog posts, get your hands on some official Marcus Hayes merchandise, or order some parts for your cars. If you don't see the parts that you need on my website, do drop us an email and I'll source what you need from one of my trusted suppliers. My email address will also be in the description. Massive, massive thanks to all my patrons for your ongoing support. But other than that, until next time, thanks for watching.